open up.
Hi, what's...
You can't be in here.
I reserved...
Step out, now.
This is a public study.
I was sitting in a public library study room, preparing a presentation on constitutional law, when the security guard told me I wasn't allowed to be there. Not because the room was reserved. Not because I was being loud. But because he'd decided I looked suspicious. My name is Dr. Kendra Baines, and I'm a federal prosecutor with the United States Attorney's Office. I've prosecuted organized crime cases, public corruption, civil rights violations, and terrorism. I've argued before federal appellate courts. I've sent corrupt politicians and violent criminals to prison. But none of that mattered to the police officer who arrested me in a library for the crime of studying while black. It was a Friday afternoon in late September. The kind of early autumn day where the light comes through windows at a golden angle and makes you think about new beginnings. I'd taken the afternoon to work outside the office, something my supervisor encouraged once a month to avoid burnout. Federal prosecution is intense. Long hours. High stakes. Cases that consume your life for months or years at a time. I had a major trial starting the following Monday. United States versus Castellano, a RICO case involving wire fraud, money laundering, and interstate trafficking. 18 months of investigation. 47 witnesses. Thousands of pages of financial records. My opening statement needed to be perfect. Clear. Compelling. Devastating. So I'd gone to the Madison Central Library, a beautiful historic building downtown with marble columns, vaulted ceilings, and quiet study rooms perfect for focused work. I'd been coming there for years. Since law school, actually. There was something about the space that helped me think clearly. I arrived at 1:15, signed in at the front desk, and reserved study room C for 3 hours. The reservation system was digital. You entered your library card number, selected your time slot, and received a confirmation. I had mine saved on my phone. Room C, 1:15 to 4:15, reserved under Kendra Baines. The study room was perfect. A small table. 2 chairs. A whiteboard on one wall. A window overlooking the street. I set up my laptop, spread out my case files, and got to work. I was wearing black slacks, a cream silk blouse, and a navy blazer. My natural hair was styled in a professional twist-out. I looked exactly like what I was. An attorney preparing for trial. My credentials were in my leather messenger bag. The official identification issued by the Department of Justice. My name. My photograph. My title, Assistant United States Attorney. The seal of the Department of Justice in raised gold. My bar cards from 3 different states. My courthouse security credentials that allowed me access to restricted areas of federal buildings. I'd been working for maybe 45 minutes when I noticed him standing outside the glass door of the study room. A security guard. White male, probably in his 50s, with gray hair, buzzed military short, and a prominent jaw. His uniform was dark blue with a patch reading Madison Security Services. His name tag said Vernon. He was staring at me through the glass. Not just looking. Staring. With an expression I couldn't quite read. Suspicion? Confusion? Hostility? Something that made my professional instincts activate. I'm a federal prosecutor. I've spent 12 years reading people. Witnesses who are lying. Defendants trying to seem innocent. Jurors deciding whether to believe testimony. You develop an instinct for when something's wrong. And something was wrong with the way this man was looking at me. I returned my attention to my laptop. Maybe he was just doing rounds. Checking the study rooms. Making sure everything was okay. 5 minutes later, there was a sharp knock on the door. I looked up. Vernon was still there, and now his hand was on the door handle. I stood and opened the door. Yes? Can I help you? You need to come with me. The words were clipped. Authoritative. Not a request. I'm sorry, what's this about? You're not authorized to be in this room. I felt my stomach tighten. Actually, I am. I have a reservation. Room C, 115 to 415. It's in the system. I don't see your name on the list. What list? The reservation is digital. I can show you the confirmation on my phone. You need to leave this room and come with me to the front desk. Can you tell me what the problem is? I checked in when I arrived. I reserved this room through the library system. I'm working quietly. What's the issue? Vernon's jaw tightened. The issue is you're in a restricted area without authorization. Now you can come voluntarily or I can have you removed. My heart was pounding now, but I kept my voice level. This isn't a restricted area. It's a public library study room that I reserved. I have documentation of that reservation. Before this goes any further, I think there's been a misunderstanding. No misunderstanding. You don't belong here. Let's go. The words hit like a slap. You don't belong here. Not, there's been an error. Not, let me check the system. You don't belong here. I'm 41 years old. I've been a black woman in America my entire life. I've been a black woman in predominantly white spaces, law school, federal court, the U.S. Attorney's Office, my entire professional career. And I've heard variations of, you don't belong here, more times than I can count. Usually more subtle. Usually more carefully phrased. But the message is always the same. I'm not leaving, I said quietly. I have every right to be here. I made a proper reservation. If there's been a technical error, we can resolve it at the front desk. But I'm not being removed from a room I legally reserved. Vernon's hand moved to the radio clipped to his belt. You're refusing to comply with security instructions? I'm declining to leave a space I have legal right to occupy based on an unsubstantiated claim. That's not refusing to comply. That's asserting my rights. I'm calling the police. Then I guess you need to do that. Because I'm not leaving without an explanation that makes sense. Vernon stepped back and spoke into his radio. This is Vernon at Madison Central. I need police response to the 3rd floor. I have an individual refusing to leave a restricted area. He walked a few feet down the hallway, still talking. I couldn't hear the entire conversation, but I caught fragments. Black female. Claims she has a reservation but I don't see it. Refusing to leave. Getting confrontational. I sat back down at the table. My hands were shaking. Part of me wanted to just leave. To avoid whatever was coming. To protect myself. But I'd spent 12 years as a federal prosecutor fighting for justice. Fighting for people's rights. And I wasn't about to surrender mine because a security guard had made assumptions based on my skin color. I pulled out my phone and opened my library account. The reservation was right there. Room C. Today's date. 1:15 to 4:15. Confirmation number 847392. I took a screenshot. Then I opened my camera and started recording video. If this was going to escalate, I wanted my own documentation. 14 minutes later, I heard footsteps. Multiple sets. Heavy boots on the marble floor. I looked up through the glass door and saw them. 2 police officers in full uniform. Both white males. One younger, maybe late 20s, lean and tall with nervous energy. The other older, mid-40s, stocky and solid with hard eyes. Their name tags read Mitchell and Torres. Vernon was with them, gesturing toward my study room, talking rapidly. All 3 approached the door. Officer Torres, the older one, knocked sharply. I stood and opened it. Ma'am, we need you to step out of the room. Officers, I'm happy to explain what's happening. I reserved this study room through the library's digital system. I have confirmation on my phone. The security guard is claiming I'm not authorized to be here, but I am. There seems to be some kind of miscommunication or technical error. The security guard says you're trespassing. I'm not trespassing. I'm a patron of this library using a room I properly reserved. I can show you the reservation confirmation right now. Torres's expression didn't change. I need to see some identification. Of course. I reached into my messenger bag slowly, keeping my movements visible. I pulled out my wallet and handed him my driver's license. Torres examined it. You live at 4732 Weston Drive? That's correct. And what are you doing here? I'm preparing for a trial. I'm an attorney. This is legal work. What kind of attorney? Federal prosecutor. Assistant United States Attorney. Torres's eyebrow raised slightly. You're a federal prosecutor. Yes. I can show you my credentials if that would help clear this up. Yeah, let's see those. I reached back into my bag and pulled out my DOJ credentials. The black leather case with the gold badge and identification card. I opened it and held it out so both officers could see clearly. Here. Department of Justice credentials. Assistant United States Attorney Kendra Baines. Criminal Division. 12 years of service. Torres took the credentials and examined them. He looked at the badge. The ID card with my photograph and the DOJ seal. The holographic security features. He handed them to Mitchell, who looked at them briefly before handing them back to Torres. These could be fake, Torres said. The words seemed to echo in the small space. I felt something cold settle in my chest. Excuse me? Anyone can print a badge and laminate an ID card. How do I know these are real? You can verify them with one phone call to the Madison field office of the U.S. Attorney. The number is on the card. Or you can call the main DOJ switchboard in Washington. I'm asking you to verify my credentials before this escalates further. I'm not making any calls. Right now, I have a security guard saying you're trespassing and a badge that might be fake. So I need you to gather your belongings and come with us. My mind was racing. I was a federal prosecutor. I'd argued in front of federal judges. I'd cross-examined hostile witnesses. I'd negotiated with defense attorneys trying every trick to undermine my cases. I knew the law. I knew my rights. And I knew exactly what was happening here. Officer Torres, I'm going to be very clear. I am an assistant United States attorney. Those credentials are genuine. I'm in a library study room that I legally reserved. I have digital confirmation of that reservation on my phone. I'm preparing for a federal trial that starts Monday. I have not violated any law or library policy. I'm asking you one more time to verify my credentials before you make a decision that will have serious consequences for your career. Torres's face flushed. Are you threatening me? I'm informing you of the facts. You're about to arrest a federal prosecutor for studying in a library. That's not a threat. That's a statement of what's happening right now. Mitchell, the younger officer, spoke up for the first time. Torres, maybe we should verify. We're not verifying anything, Torres cut him off. She's being confrontational and refusing to comply. That's enough for me. He pulled handcuffs from his belt. Turn around and put your hands behind your back. The study room suddenly felt very small. Through the glass walls, I could see other library patrons stopping to watch. Someone had their phone out. Others were turning to see what was happening. Officer Torres, if you handcuff me, you are arresting a federal prosecutor without probable cause. You are refusing to verify legitimate credentials. This is being witnessed by multiple people. Some of them are recording. Your body camera is recording. This will end your career and cost your department millions of dollars. I'm giving you one final opportunity to make the right decision. Torres grabbed my arm. Hands behind your back. Now. I had a choice. I could resist. I could refuse. I could make this difficult. But I'd prosecuted enough cases to know how that would be portrayed. Resisting arrest. Assaulting an officer. Obstruction. Even if every charge was later dropped, the narrative would be set. So I complied. I turned around slowly and placed my hands behind my back. The metal handcuffs clicked around my wrists. They were tight. Deliberately, painfully tight. You're under arrest for trespassing and obstruction. I'm not trespassing. I have a reservation. And I haven't obstructed anything. I've answered every question and provided identification. Tell it to the judge. Mitchell gathered my belongings, my laptop, my case files, my messenger bag, everything going into evidence bags. 12 years of working as a federal prosecutor, and I was watching my trial preparation being treated like contraband. Torres walked me out of the study room. The hallway had gone completely silent. Dozens of people were watching. I could see phones raised, recording from multiple angles. A young black woman with her hand over her mouth, eyes wide with shock. An older white man shaking his head. A teenage boy recording video with his phone held high. My name is Dr. Kendra Baines, I said loudly, making sure everyone could hear. I'm an Assistant United States Attorney. I reserved this study room legally. I showed these officers my Department of Justice credentials. They're arresting me anyway. Please record this. Please share what you're seeing. This matters. Ma'am, you need to stop talking, Torres said. I'm exercising my First Amendment right to speak. I'm not interfering with your arrest. I'm informing witnesses of what's happening. We walked through the library, past the circulation desk where the staff stood frozen in shock, through the metal detectors at the entrance, out the front doors into the bright autumn afternoon. Torres's patrol car was parked at the curb. He opened the back door and guided me inside. The back seat was hard plastic. It smelled like sweat and fear and desperation. I'd sent people to prison who'd sat in this exact seat. Now I was sitting here myself, handcuffed and arrested for the crime of being a black woman in a library study room. Torres got behind the wheel. Mitchell took the passenger seat. Neither spoke. Torres started the engine and pulled into traffic. I used the time to think. To plan. To build the case I knew was coming. Unlawful arrest. False imprisonment. Civil rights violations. Failure to verify credentials. Racial profiling. Municipal liability. Every element was falling into place. The drive to the police station took 11 minutes. They brought me in through the rear entrance, past holding cells where other arrested people sat waiting, into a processing area where a female officer sat at a desk surrounded by paperwork. She looked up as we entered. She was black, probably in her late 30s, with intelligent eyes and an expression that immediately registered concern. Her name tag read Washington. Torres, what have we got? Trespassing at Madison Central Library. Subject was in a restricted area without authorization. Refused to leave when security and officers instructed her to. Washington stood up. Did she resist? She refused to comply and got confrontational. I spoke up. Officer Washington, my name is Dr. Kendra Baines. I'm an Assistant United States Attorney with 12 years of service. I was in a library study room that I legally reserved through their digital system. Security claimed I wasn't authorized despite my having reservation confirmation. I showed Officers Torres and Mitchell my Department of Justice credentials. Officer Torres claimed they might be fake and refused to verify them. I complied with every instruction. There was no resistance. And this entire incident is being recorded by multiple library patrons and by these officers' body cameras. Washington's face went very still. She showed you DOJ credentials? Torres pulled my credentials from his pocket and tossed them on Washington's desk. Says she's a federal prosecutor. Washington picked them up carefully. She examined every detail. The badge, weight and finish. The ID card holographic features. The embossed seal. The microprinting along the edges. Her expression changed from concern to something closer to horror. Torres, these are real. Could be good fakes. They're not fakes. I've seen enough federal credentials to know. She looked at me. Ma'am, what's your badge number and office location? I recited both from memory, along with the direct line to my supervisor's office and the main switchboard for the U.S. Attorney. Washington picked up her phone. The call took less than 5 minutes. I could hear her side clearly. Confirming my identity. Verifying my active status. Apologizing repeatedly to whoever was on the other end. When she hung up, her expression was thunderous. You arrested an active Assistant United States Attorney for studying in a library. Security called us. She was trespassing. She had a reservation. I just called the library. They confirmed it. Room C, 115 to 415, reserved under her library card number. She was exactly where she was supposed to be. Take those cuffs off her right now. Torres unlocked the handcuffs. My wrists were raw. Deep red marks were visible where the metal had dug into my skin. I rubbed them slowly, making sure Washington saw the damage. A commander arrived within minutes. A white woman in her 50s with silver hair and 3 decades of command presence. Captain Linda Reyes. She listened to Washington's briefing, and with each sentence, her expression grew darker. When Washington finished, Reyes turned to me. Ms. Baines, on behalf of the Madison Police Department, I apologize. This should never have happened. I said nothing. I was done talking to police. Now I was cataloging evidence. Reyes turned to Torres. Badge. Weapon. You're on administrative leave effective immediately. Captain, I responded to a call. You arrested a federal prosecutor for studying. You refused to verify credentials. You ignored your partner's suggestion to check. Give me your badge. Torres handed them over with shaking hands. Mitchell kept his eyes on the floor. Within 2 hours, the videos went viral. Multiple angles from library patrons. Me stating my credentials. Showing my badge. Being handcuffed. Being walked through the library past dozens of shocked witnesses. The hashtags exploded. Federal prosecutor arrested in library. DOJ attorney handcuffed for studying while black. Arrested for preparing for trial. The outrage was immediate and overwhelming. The Department of Justice issued a formal statement expressing deep concern and demanding a full investigation. The Attorney General personally called the Madison Police Chief. Civil rights organizations mobilized. Legal professional associations issued condemnations. Vernon, the security guard who'd made the initial complaint, was fired within 24 hours. Madison Security Services terminated his contract and issued a public apology. The library system announced a comprehensive review of their security protocols and bias training. But the real story was the lawsuit. I filed it myself. 43 pages of legal precision. Every citation perfect. Every argument airtight. Unlawful arrest without probable cause. False imprisonment. Violation of civil rights under Section 1983. Racial profiling and discrimination. Excessive force through unnecessarily tight handcuffs. Failure to verify credentials despite repeated requests. Municipal liability for inadequate training and supervision. Named defendants, Officer Torres, Officer Mitchell for failure to intervene, Captain Reyes for supervisory failure, Vernon the security guard, Madison Security Services, the City of Madison. The city's attorneys reviewed the evidence. Videos from multiple angles. Body camera footage. The library's digital reservation records showing my legitimate booking. The phone logs showing I was exactly who I claimed to be. Torres's history, which included 9 previous complaints, 4 of them involving alleged racial bias. Their legal conclusion was immediate and unanimous. Indefensible. The city settled within 13 months. $6.1 million. Madison Security Services contributed $1.2 million from their insurance. Vernon settled individually for an undisclosed amount. Officer Torres was terminated 17 weeks after the incident. The termination letter was devastating. It cited unlawful arrest, refusal to verify federal credentials, use of excessive force, pattern of complaints suggesting discriminatory policing, and conduct unbecoming an officer. His name was entered into the National Decertification Database. His law enforcement career ended at 43 years old. But his termination was just the beginning. The Department of Justice Civil Rights Division opened a pattern and practice investigation into the Madison Police Department. Not just because of my arrest, but because the data showed Torres was part of a larger problem. The investigation took 22 months. They analyzed 12 years of arrest data, use of force reports, civilian complaints, internal affairs investigations, training records, and supervisory evaluations. Their findings were released in a 168-page report. Black residents were stopped at rates 4.6 times higher than white residents. They were arrested at rates 3.9 times higher. They were subjected to use of force at rates nearly 6 times higher. Officers with multiple complaints alleging racial bias remained on duty with minimal consequences. The Madison Police Department entered into a federal consent decree. The mandated reforms were sweeping. Immediate administrative leave for any officer with 5 or more complaints related to discrimination. Mandatory credential verification for all federal, state, and local law enforcement before any arrest. Independent civilian review board with subpoena power and binding disciplinary authority. Real-time body camera review by supervisors. Quarterly demographic analysis of all stops and arrests. Federal monitoring for 7 years. I testified at city council hearings. My testimony was careful, precise, and devastating. I've spent 12 years prosecuting criminals. I've sent violent offenders to federal prison. I've protected this community through my work. And I was arrested in a public library for preparing for trial because a security guard and a police officer couldn't accept that a black woman belonged in a study room. I paused. Let the words settle. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was racial profiling supported by institutional indifference. Officer Torres had 9 previous complaints. 4 involved allegations of racial bias. He remained on active duty. That's not a failure of one officer. That's a failure of an entire system. Another pause. If this can happen to a federal prosecutor with DOJ credentials and 12 years of institutional backing, what happens to everyone else? What happens to students? To community members? To people who don't have badges and positions and resources to fight back? The room was absolutely silent. I donated the entire settlement. $3 million to legal defense funds for communities affected by discriminatory policing. $2 million to scholarships for minority law students. The remainder to police accountability organizations and bias training programs. I don't need the money, I told reporters. I need the system to change. I need this incident to protect people who don't have what I have. The library footage became required training at police academies throughout the state. Law schools used it in civil rights courses. The American Bar Association cited it in publications about racial bias in the legal profession. Torres never worked in law enforcement again. He tried private security but was unemployable once his history became known. He gave one interview, claiming he'd had legitimate concerns about credential authenticity. The interviewer asked him why he hadn't made a simple phone call to verify. Torres had no answer. I stayed with the U.S. Attorney's Office. I continued prosecuting major cases. But colleagues say the experience changed me. Made me more vocal about racial bias in the criminal justice system. More willing to challenge institutional practices that had been accepted as normal. I still go to the library sometimes. Not Madison Central, but others. And every time I reserve a study room, I remember. I remember what it felt like to be handcuffed for studying. I remember the shock on people's faces. I remember the lesson that even a DOJ badge isn't always enough protection against bias. What happened to me wasn't unique. It was just documented. It was just high profile enough that it couldn't be ignored. Thousands of Black Americans experience similar treatment regularly. In libraries. In coffee shops. In parks. In stores. In their own neighborhoods. But they don't have federal credentials. They don't have institutional power. They don't have resources to force accountability. That's why I insisted the footage remain public. That's why I donated the settlement. That's why I continue speaking about it. So it becomes more than my story. So it becomes evidence. Proof. Catalyst for change. Torres's career is over. That's justice. The city paid millions. That's accountability. The DOJ forced systemic reform. That's progress. But those things don't undo the trauma. They don't erase the humiliation. They don't restore what was taken. The real question is what we do with this knowledge. Do other departments learn from Madison's expensive mistake? Do other officers think twice before dismissing credentials they don't want to believe? Do other communities demand accountability before the next viral video? Because if we don't, we're just waiting. For the next library. The next study room. The next Black professional who doesn't look like she belongs. Should law enforcement face automatic federal investigation after wrongfully arresting fellow law enforcement officials? Thanks for watching. Do remember to hit the subscribe button, like and share this story, and I'll see you in the next one.